Welcome to season 9 of the Parenting for the Present podcast. I'm not sure how 8 seasons have gone by, but here we are. Welcome everyone back. We're so excited. We've got Matthew. We've got a big change this year. Can you tell us a little bit about who's joining us?
All right, guys, we've had Eve with us. Eve Wiley is a licensed professional counselor. I've known Eve for years. We were on the board together at a local preschool, and Eve brings a wealth of knowledge, and we're changing things up a little bit. We feel like having a mom who has 3 children and a wide array of experience in the mental health field would be a real good dimension. And we're here also today just to celebrate Andy Stoker. Dr. Stoker moved to early help me out. He moved to
Albuquerque, New
Albuquerque. I had
Mexico.
brain block. Albuquerque, and he's serving a church there. And the demands of what Andy's doing there made it really difficult for him to be as available to the podcast. I know he's still with us and still a part of us, and I'm sure he'll show up. But we've invited Eve to be the third member of the team, and we're so excited. I get to work with Eve every day at the office, and it's a pleasure. I know everyone on the podcast will enjoy her as much as Early and I do.
And Eve, before you introduce yourself to the group or the audience, I just want to say when Matthew and I got the email from Andy saying that um, you could tell it was really weighing on him. It was a hard decision, and I really appreciated his candidness, his willingness to have a hard conversation and just let us know that this has meant so much to him. And he's been a huge part. He started the foundation with us. He's been here since the beginning. But I appreciate him letting us know, and we wish him all the best. And we're going to stay in touch. And so grateful for everything that he's done for both Matthew and I personally, and then for the foundation and the podcast. So we will miss him. And thank you, Andy, for all you've done for Parenting for the Present. So, Eve, do you want to tell? I know we did a little bit with the kind of summer episode, but can you tell the audience a little bit about who is Eve Wiley?
Who is Eve Wiley? Well, that is a loaded question. I am very excited to be the new host on Parenting for the Present, and I know that I have big shoes to fill. So I am going to try and walk that in the shadow of Andy and fill those shoes. I am clinical director of training here at the Housing Center. I get to annoy Matthew every single day. It is my favorite part of my job. And I have 3 children. I have an 11-year-old, I have an 8-year-old, and I have a 5-year-old. So I specialize in a lot of things in therapy between play therapy, adolescence, kind of across the lifespan. I do a lot of parent training, and I am a supervisor for our university partnerships with graduate students. So recently, I've found myself teaching a lot, reading a lot of the books which is where my list of guests comes from for this podcast. So that's kind of where I'm at currently, and I'm just very happy to be here.
I think it's going to be fun this season because we've had really amazing guests, and Eve, your list that you sent Early and I when we were planning really adds some new and different dimensions. So I think that's going to be a fun season, and our listeners will notice some differences, which, change is part of any active, organization or system. And so super excited to have Eve, and I know that's going to be fun. And part of the fun, which I personally enjoy so much, is our October mental health walk. So the Mending Minds Walk is our fundraiser that we do as part of Parenting for the Present, and we use the proceeds from the fundraiser to support mental health initiatives. Right now, we're working with the King's Academy and St. Philip's Episcopal School. Both are schools that we have our interns that we train and that Eve supervises go, and they're doing executive function training there. They're running social and emotional curriculums. And Parenting from the Present started, more than 5 years ago now with the initiative Proactivity. And so the mental health walk allows us to raise funds to fulfill the mission of proactive mental health. We feel like teaching young children and teachers and parents the importance of social and emotional awareness. And, a lot of us now hear the buzzword executive function skills. These are the skills that allow us all to be successful with things that we're initiating and organizing and planning and self-monitoring. And the most important of that, and we see a number of examples. The Cowboys-Eagles game was yesterday, and we saw a really poor example of emotional regulation, adults spitting at each other. So we feel like if we teach young children how to regulate their emotions, then we can help them as they become more mature adults.
That is so fantastic that you brought this back to the Cowboys Eagles game and emotional regulation. That is awesome. Hey, Eve, since you've been so heavily involved this year with the Mending Minds 5K and walk, which again is happening on October 4th, can you tell people how they can best support? How can they find out more information, etc.?
Yes. So lots of different ways to support. Obviously, sponsorships, giving money is one, signing up to be a community partner, to just come and have visibility there, signing up to run the 5K or walk the other one, the 1K, I guess. I'm not a runner. In fact, if you see me running, you should run too because something's wrong. I will be there handing out water. That is what I'm going to be doing, and I love that journey for everybody else. Um, but yes, so that is we will have some QR codes for the Mending Minds that should be linked to this episode as well. But that's kind of the goal. I'm really excited about the bandanas and the necklaces and kind of the other activities that are going to be there. But I will say that this is something, Matthew and I have said on multiple boards. Just my family were involved in lots of different charities, and to be able to have a front row seat to see the impact that this has in our community it's really powerful. And I think one of the things that I would like to highlight that was new this year, which I get this question a lot, we have been able to provide over 200, and I think we hit 238 free counseling hours for our community in relation to the flood victims. And in the course of 2.5 months, that's huge. And the reason we are able to do that is because of the 5K, and because of our partnerships with the university. So just being able to see this outreach that this fundraiser has across all of Dallas has been really amazing.
It was really to piggyback on that, Eve, on Wednesday, our interns, we had our staff meeting. We talked about their experiences in counseling and just how much those master's level students grew through their connection with young children who were at Camp Mystic or family members who came in for counseling. And so it's just really amazing that the foundation can support those initiatives and we can, provide access to people in the community. I think it's really good. And so we're hoping for good weather in October 4th. I think it's a great event for the community. And I think the connection, I really felt it last year with the community and people coming out and talking about family members who may struggle with mental health. And we're doing some different things with different sponsorship levels. I walk for so and so, and so people can remember or honor kind of loved ones who have had difficult challenges with their mental health. So I think it'll be a good time. I think that'll be great. And I think, this year, I've noticed just so many parents coming in the office and really wanting to be great parents, not just good parents, but great parents. And so I thought one of the things that would be nice for us to talk about today is the concept of a good enough parent. Eve, you want to kind of go through what that general concept is, and then Early and I can talk through, well, I don't know if we want to go too in detail about our own not so good enough parenting experiences. I
All
know
the
we've shared a
mistakes I've
lot.
made.
Between you and our 7 children, and then Eve, your 3, our 10, we probably could fill hours and hours of the not so good enough parent. But let's go with the good enough parent today.
Absolutely. I hear that a lot. And, I think for the longest time it was the concept of the helicopter parent, and then it was the lawnmower parent, and now we're seeing the jackhammer parent where it's like I am going to clear the path for my child to be successful, but my child doesn't learn like the resiliency. So I don't really know I think that that is what's happening when we are on social media all the time and we see these curated feeds, or someone is trying to sell something and we're trying to like do this concept and then it's like, why isn't it working for my child? And it's like that projection of anxiety. And so this concept of like the good enough parent, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time, I'm going to be doing really good, and 20% of the time, I need to be realistic. And I think that's just kind of life is like normalizing that when we look at extremes, when we see that jackhammer parent, we have a lot of, there are environmental problems with that, with a child may have limited resiliency, limited independence, failure to launch, that type of thing. And then unfortunately, we have other research that shows neglect, and you see what happens with those children. So what I constantly challenge my parents is how can we fit in the middle and be just good enough? Hence, good enough parenting.
Yeah, and so for me, good enough means making sure children take care of their sleep, making sure they're getting a lot of exercise, making sure that they have access to um, the ability to develop their spiritual side through faith formation, regardless of, religious direction. And then I think that good enough for me also means the ability to recognize and acknowledge a mistake in ourselves, because I think we're seeing so much. I see so many children who really have a hard time saying, I'm sorry. And
Hmm.
if a child has been around an adult who doesn't say, I'm sorry, then that child's going to have difficulty making amends. You know, again, my 2 cents, the next 10 years is going to be about learning how we get along with people who fundamentally think differently from us. And I think good enough is exposing our children to people who have different perspectives, who come from different backgrounds. We can get in our own echo chambers and really feel validated by people who think the same way that we do. But the real preparedness for our young children is having them exposed to people who think differently and walking away without hate.
I love that. Um, I was thinking, and Eve, every time I talk with you, I get like a new thought and a new phrase to use. So jackhammer parenting is new to me. I've heard snowplow, I've heard bulldozer, but now it's jackhammer. So is jackhammer different than snowplow or bulldozer? Because if you look at bulldozer and snowplow, right? Like I think this gets back to parents. We struggle, and it is hard for us to see our kids uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
we want to make life easy for them, and we want to clear out all the obstacles. But to your point, you end up with a kid that is not resilient, is not independent, et cetera, et cetera. So is there a difference in jackhammer parenting, and what's a better alternative?
I don't know if there's a difference. I think it's still kind of the same, I will destroy anything in the path to clear it for my child.
Yeah.
So, I think there's like a nuance there. But I really just land on the resiliency piece of this. When you have a child that doesn't practice distress tolerance, or if you have a child that is not, it's kind of what I think about with college kids. Not trying to pick on you guys right now, but they don't know how to pick up the phone and have a conversation, and it's like, no, I need you to teach you to talk on the phone. And it's because they haven't had that practice. There are not landlines anymore. And I'm kind of guilty of this too. If you call me, it's probably going to give me an anxiety attack, and I'm going to at least read the voicemail before I actually answer it. Like, could have sent me an email or a text message. But I think that, I at least had the landline experience, so I can talk on the phone. But it's just those daily life things that builds resilience, and you just know. My best story is of this kid who went to the grocery store with his mom, and they were in a hurry. So she says, "Okay, Aiden, you go over there and go get, the two steaks out of the meat counter. I'll go over there." Well, she walks over, and he's just standing there, and he's like touching the glass. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I don't know how to get the steak out." And she's like, "Oh my God, I have failed you because you have to ask the butcher." And he's like, "Why? I didn't know." And so I think a lot of it is that we take for granted those little micro moments, whether we're modeling it or we just do it for them, which is why we say all the time, never do for a child what they can do for themselves. And so I think there's a lot in it with the good enough parenting. I see a lot of the perfectionism with parents because I think it's in the sense that they feel guilt over not being a perfect parent, but then they expect perfectionism from their child. And what we need to remember is that children don't need flawless parents. They need parents who are present, who are consistent, and responsive most of the time. I'm not talking about a, beck and call, jump how high situation, most of the time. And then we need to meet those needs of reliability. A good enough parent meets their child's physical and emotional needs, kind of what Matthew talked about, enough that that child feels safe, loved, and valued, and to be a part of the family. And then allowing frustration. How many times do we see parents where they save their child from that distress because they're upset or they don't want to create a scene? It's going to reflect poorly on them. I mean, I'm guilty of that with my 5-year old. Winnie, I love you, but like she's kind of a nightmare. Like it's kind of hard to take her out in public, but I'm aware of that. But if we allow that frustration and we don't prevent every single disappointment, then that child is going to experience those small frustrations safely, and that builds resilience. In fact, what I'm doing right now in supervision is we are reading a book about grit because what we are seeing and struggling with is helping kids identify what motivates you. And why are we seeing children not putting in effort because it's fear of failure or fear of the parent giving them criticism. They just don't have that distress tolerance. And then the last piece of this good enough parenting kind of philosophy is what Matthew brought up, which is repairing over perfection. So, mistakes, let's normalize those mistakes. If you fall down 7 times, the most important thing is that you got up the 8th time. And so, mistakes are going to be inevitable, but what matters is a parent's ability to repair, which is apologize and reconnect after a rupture. If you yell, yes, we know we're not supposed to yell. Guess what? I yell all the time. But what matters is not what I did, it's what I did after what I did, which is apologize and model repairing. Because to both of your points, if you don't repair that relationship, then this leads to cancel culture and cut off society of everything. You're dead to me type situations.
Yeah, and I think genetically, we're each of us is wired to be a little bit more emotionally reactive than the other. And I think that it's hard to change those genetics. Some of us can respond really calmly in situations and react later, and others, we lose it and then we have to come back. But exactly the repair is what I see, so many parents really struggle with because it's vulnerable to repair. It's vulnerable to say I screwed up. It's vulnerable to say I did the wrong thing. But as soon as our children can recognize that we can do that as adults, then it's all the things that people who go to therapy to get it's forgiveness, it's self-acceptance, it's empathy, it's concern for others. So if we can teach those things, then we're really moving towards the good enough parent and moving away from the perfectionistic parent that really does get reinforced through all the messaging that gets sent to us through the books we read, the media that we consume. If you do it this way, then it's going to turn out well. We have 4 children, and there's not one way that's worked for all 4 of them. And there's not one way that's worked for any of the 4 of them. I mean, the point is I think we just see you have to do the best you can, but stay focused on the fundamentals that you talked about, Eve.
If we're talking about embracing good enough parenting, is the message for our kids also that good enough being you're good enough as a child, right? Like, so the one thing I see, I've had multiple, and actually this happened in my own family, where if you don't, your kids need to see you make mistakes, right? They need to know that we are not perfect. And then we make, I mean, again, I was joking. I think I'm going to write a book on like all the mistakes I've made and let my kids co-author it with me, right? Because they'll be like, let me remind you of that story, Dad. Because, but I think, is that also, I was thinking about this idea of as a kid, good enough, right? Like, because there's no perfect child. There's no again, reminding kids with resilience, making mistakes is part of the process. Eve, you said you fall down 7 times, you get up the 8th, you keep going. And then how do we encourage our kids to set realistic expectations? Is that modeling it? Is that being there for them and connecting when they do make mistakes? How would you guys say that we can encourage our kids to set realistic expectations as well?
Well, what I remind parents all the time is when you're with a child that is demonstrating those perfectionistic qualities and focusing on that effort piece. So I don't want you to focus on the scoreboard. I want you to focus on the next play, whether that's in sports, whether that's on homework, whether that's in your relationships, whatever it is, because the focus is on the effort. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try a different way. And then my kids roll their eyes when I say this, but I know they're listening because I've heard them say it. Is the quote from Edison. I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found 8,000 ways that it did not work. And so that kind of goes back to that cognitive reframing that I think is really helpful, especially for kids. Because if I can focus and get a kid to focus on cognitive flexibility and get away from their natural kind of how they're drawn towards rigidity because rigidity feels safe, then I know that we're going to get somewhere with it. And so that's kind of how I approach it.
I agree. And I think also, it is modeling early, but it's also having, the CEOs of the family, which are the parents, having a vision. And I think a lot of times when skeptics who hear us talking about good enough parenting, they may hear us saying, well, anything goes, or just accept your children regardless of what they do. That's not at all what good enough parenting is. Good enough parenting is having a set of standards, a set of values that is the vision that your children are hopefully walking to. Some of your children are going to walk at a faster pace and kind of be meeting those expectations, and that's going to be gratifying as a parent and satisfying as a parent. You're going to feel better about yourself. But different children are on different timelines. I met with a student this morning who's 23 years old, and he's finally found a peer group and he finally has acceptance. And for years, his parents said, he's socially isolated, he's lonely, he doesn't have a peer group. This is a student has good social skills with adults. He's likable, he's handsome. He's there. He's 23. He's not 16, he's not 8, he's not 9, but he got there. And so I think the good enough parent is knowing that if we provide these antecedents of love and care and concern and structure and taking care of emotional and physical and spiritual health, then our children are going to become who they're going to be. And we can't jackhammer them into a mold that they're not going to be in the first place.
Well, and let's kind of bring into the cultural aspect of this too. The amount of pressure that parents feel, especially younger, of making sure that their kids have everything that they need to get ahead. There's a lot of conversations where, this is an example too of how developmentally these kids are not ready for things. But from a societal cultural perspective, we're still pushing them for that. And then we're wondering, oh no, why are they failing? They're not there yet. And so I know as a parent, I feel that too. Does my kid need to be in Russian math? And I look to the peers and I'm like, oh my gosh, your 5-year-old gets home at like 8 p.m. at night from all their extracurriculars. And I already live on the sidelines with my other kids, and am I failing my third one? And a lot of that kind of gets reinforced, I think, in our support systems too. And I know that that's been hard for me. And I know what the research says. I know it says chill out, and it's still hard for me to chill out about it because, well, I don't want my kid to get behind. But it's hard to remember that development and effort actually count more in those equations.
And I think it's as much not get behind Eve as is not get far enough ahead.
Well, that too, or I'm gonna have to do all of this just to for them to remain not even competitive, but just in the same ballpark,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, we hear about colleges, it's harder to get it, get into colleges, and how do you get into the places that we'd like our students to get to. So there are really pretty strong forces that blow us in the wrong direction. And I think that's why hopefully podcasts like ours, hopefully kind of connecting, when we go to church or synagogue or temple, and when we meet with professionals, we can stay grounded in some of these principles. But I really think that having a clear vision of what is strong, and earlier you and I have talked about it with Andy in our podcast in prior seasons, just the concept of what is important for our family and what are the mantle that we hang, these values on that our children work towards. I think that really does keep everybody oriented in the right direction.
Well, and I think that's one of my hopes in joining this podcast too, is to be able to really talk about how do we normalize a lot of experiences of being with a parent in a world where everything is curated and there's so much information consumption, and these people online make it look so easy to do these things, because I think a lot of times as connected as social media makes us, it also makes us feel like we're on an island. And so normalizing a lot of those things I think is really important.
Yes, 1000% agree. I want to come back to that. And then I was thinking, Matthew, as you were talking about good enough parenting not being like, there's the authoritative parenting, right? There's the okay, let me get it
Arian.
right. Or authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive, right?
Yep.
And I think that good enough falls under the authoritative. Is that fair? And so
Got it.
trying, thank you. Are you saying that I
Good for
Diana
can't?
us.
Baumrind would be proud of you. It's
Thank you.
good, really.
Thanks. I'm trying, guys. So trying, I think sometimes people think of, and I don't know if you said it, Eve, or if it was Matthew, but that if you're talking about good enough parenting, well, then you're just going to be kind of loosey goosey, and the kids are kind of running the shit. No, what you're talking about, right, is warmth. You're talking about being responsive. You're talking about being supportive and connecting. But there's also clear boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and so, Eve, I want to come back to what you were saying about normalizing some of these experiences. If you're okay, so how do you set healthy boundaries, and how do you deal with the societal pressures? Because you've got to your point, everything is curated and looks perfect on Instagram, right? Like I'm just rocking it as a parent, and let me give you all the stuff that I do right, and then you feel like, oh my God, I'm failing here. So, and then even offline, right? Like well-meaning friends and families, right? Like they want to give you advice. They want to tell you what worked as their parenting style. So what are there some practical tips where we as parents can set some healthy boundaries and maybe trust some of our own instincts?
Absolutely. I think part of that is really defining the parental hierarchy. And we do a lot of that every single day, because when you get online and you see people talk about gentle parenting, and I think now we're kind of seeing it's not well understood in the sense that that is permissive, right? And gentle parenting is always supposed to come with a consequence, with a boundary. But I think it's been misunderstood to be like, oh, you do you, YOLO, not really understanding the boundary of this and the consequence of it, which is why we want to use words like, hey, if you choose to hit me, then you choose not to fill in the blank. Returning that power back to them, taking that power struggle out of it. That's something that I love that phrase. Um, there was Raising Good Humans is one that has a great book, and she talks about all feelings are okay, all behaviors are not. And I have to work a lot with parents on that, because they're like, well, I don't want them to be mad at me. That's not your job. And that is an emotional boundary, right? Like we always tend to set those physical boundaries with our kids. But when we talk about verbal and emotional boundaries, that's a little bit different. And so I think for practical tools, that choice giving method is really effective. If you choose to do that, then you choose the consequence. Hey, that's a choice that you made. I didn't make you did that. Man, you can try a different choice tomorrow or later, but you made that choice. And so parental hierarchy, really establishing that, and kids are really, really good at triangulating parents. Well, mom said no, so I'm going to go butter up dad. And well, dad said I could do it. It's like, oh man, we got to check in with each other. We just got outplayed on this one. But I think that, we say it too. Adult problems are for adults and little problems are for little kids. And a lot of things simply are not a choice for a child. That is not a child's decision. And if you think about it when it comes to boundaries, if you are driving down a road at night, The only way that you know how to stay on the road is because of the reflective lines. That is what you're doing as a parent. You draw the lines in the boundary and you let that child how they get to decide how they are going back and forth and floating in between those boundaries. Because we want them to be able to make mistakes within those boundaries as long as they stay in there and we're giving them the freedom. We're not micromanaging them to do it. But it's very, very important to maintain those boundaries and those consequences when they start to learn that when they are younger, then when they're older and they choose to stay out past curfew, okay, well, you still have a consequence. And that's kind of the mechanism that we're building. We don't want to go to your room, go to your room, go to your room. And then parents are confused when their 15-year-old is slamming the door. It's like, well, you just set the neural pathways for 15 years when they get upset to go to the room. Like they just learned it. So those are kind of the things that I conceptualize and teach from like a practical standpoint.
And I think, related to that part, your point of the parental hierarchy is the anchor points of what's important to your family. So that practically saying to your children, that's just not how we do things in our family. When they compare, other families who may give their children phones earlier than you're going to, or access to certain material earlier, you just simply say, that's not how we do things in our family. What you're doing is you're saying it's our shared vision of how we do things. This is the parents of the child, and you anchor to those things. So I think it's really essential that parents have anchor points that help them stay within the road, and then they then can be illuminated, following your example, Eve, towards their long-term goal, because children are built, they're neurologically and anatomically built to become better versions of themselves. I say a lot of the time, I'm a pediatric
Mm-hmm.
psychologist, not a geriatric psychologist, because I like the growth and the help that I get just from a child's development. They're going to
Well,
naturally get better.
boundaries help kids feel safe. If
Absolutely.
they know
All
where
of
their
it.
boundaries are, they are not going to always push them. And the
If the three
technology
of
piece is coming up a lot with the phones. I actually just had this conversation of, why does so and so get a phone in fifth grade? Why can't I have one? You actually had a way better response because my response to him was, I love that journey for them. It's not yours.
That's great.
That's
Well,
good
I thought
enough
you were going to
parenting,
say, I
right?
told you so.
Yeah,
So
that is
that's
good
one
I
enough.
better
told
than
you
I
so.
told you so.
No,
Yeah,
my
That's
other
that's
also
a
a little
favorite.
problem.
better.
Yeah, I
That's
try not to say I told you so. I think if you ask my kids what I say the most is probably, if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. That's probably what they would say. But yes,
I'm not,
I
I
can
love that
relate to
journey for
that.
them.
my kids
Yeah,
are
I
older
love that.
now, and I'm not, probably FCC won't allow me to say the things that I say when I'm frustrated with my kids. So we'll just keep it at that.
Oh, Matthew, can I ask, is a anchor point the same thing as a value?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Okay.
I think yeah, I think your values anchor you. So I would say that's the case. And what I was going to say earlier, if the three of us said, okay, let's go on a trip, and that was it, I would have way more anxiety than if someone said, okay, we're going to go to this continent, we're going to do these things. So children need guidance. And this is why a lot of children, especially anxious kids on the weekends and the summer, struggle, because you lose 7 hours of structure that school gives you during the school year. I've had so many of my anxious children immediately get better because they're in school now. And so they know exactly what's going to happen from the time that they wake up until 3:34. And then all that has to be structured is 4 o'clock to bedtime. That's a way better thing than this empty palette of a day that's not structured. So I think your values, provide those guideposts that children can kind of drive towards and feel better.
I am personally the best version of myself when my children are in school. So I agree with that.
Said
That's
every
great.
parent in the world, right? Yes.
Right, right, right.
But it does open the conversation of values, even morals, talking points, because I think a lot of times as adults, when we put our adult lens on kid things, did we teach them that stealing is wrong, or did we just assume that they should have already known that? And so it does offer, like, in our family, we do and don't do that. It's also just a way to dialogue about things that it feels more natural to come up to you. But I do, when we're working with kids on, self-identity and their self-esteem, we talk a lot about core beliefs, family values, and morality. Because, if you don't stand for something, you can fall for anything. And how will you know with peer pressure and things come up, is that in line with your beliefs? When you're struggling with guilt, shame, or avoidance and anxiety, is that because one of your values feels compromised? It's just a way for us to really give a vocabulary to an experience to dialogue and process at a deeper level.
Well, and they're really the stair steps to the harder things that we all worry about. Why would or wouldn't you vape? Why would or wouldn't you drink? Why would or wouldn't you use drugs? And if you don't have those anchor points, it's much easier to say, well, of course you would. You would try it. It's fun to experiment. If you have anchor points, those are the common reasons that children who don't engage in risky behavior say they don't, is because there's a value behind their decision not to engage in self-defeating behavior.
Yeah, I think a conversation in the using the lens and, to your point, the point, or whatever we want to call it, a value, that is a much easier conversation versus, I mean, to your point as a parent, hey, is that in keeping with what we do and our family values? So I like that a lot. Um, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I think we could maybe have a follow up because there's things we didn't touch on. Overscheduling. We didn't talk about, Eve, you were talking about with the phone and technology, a support network. And I think things have gotten different, hopefully, in September of 2025. You've got Jonathan Haidt putting out The Anxious Generation. There's a movement among parents to say, hey, can we work together and support each other so that, hey, can we agree on when the kid gets a phone together, but also that doesn't mean social media or a browser. Like, let's work through that. So I think there's um what's the word I'm looking for in terms of the support net well, what if I came back to a support network? There are like-minded people out there that will help support you, that whereas in the past, if you might have said, hey, we're not going to get a phone until, or you're not going to be on social media, you were kind of out on an island by yourself. So I think that's something we
Yeah.
could talk about in another episode. But are there thoughts as we wrap up, maybe some takeaways we could give the audience about, okay, so if I'm going to embrace this good enough parenting and I'm going to try to maybe unplug from some of the social media and, Eve, to your point, the curation and the societal pressures, what can I do and how can I parent in this modern world with this good enough attitude?
I think it starts with self-compassion, that it's okay to just be good enough. It's okay for your kids to have big feelings, and really focusing. I tell my parents a lot is if this is a donut and the hole is the problem, focus on the relationship, which is the donut, and not on the problem. And so I think a lot of times that answers your question of, am I focusing on this too much? Am I being critical too much? And focusing on that relationship with them. Um, yeah, Matthew, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I mean, my perspective is, um, I think they should be conveyed to our children. We just need to do better tomorrow. And what happened today where we didn't do better is the fuel that drives you towards the future. And I think without that type of a mindset, and so I guess the simple word early would be mindset. If we're conveying a growth mindset or a positive mindset, and this gets at, the essence of what is cognitive behavioral therapy, which any therapist you go to now, most therapists use a cognitive behavioral approach, which the model is, it's not really what happens to you, it's what you think about or your interpretation of what happens to you. And so if we teach our children that negative life events are going to happen to us, and if we take those events as opportunities for growth and forward movement, then nothing's going to hold us back. So I think parents having that optimism and and treating the things that interfere with optimism, treating depression, treating anxiety, treating um, stress that's not well managed will allow our children to grow up in those type of situations where they can move towards grit, persistence, and growth.
Yeah, I always think back to also it's hard to pour from an empty cup, right? So starting with taking care of ourselves and setting that example. And then this idea that no matter what you might see, and I'm reminding myself here, everybody, um, your kids better than anybody else does. So I think you can read a bunch of parenting books, you can listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a ton of experts out there that ostensibly have not made any mistakes. But really, at the end of the day, what really matters, right, is the love and connection you make with your own child. And what a cool opportunity to form and develop that relationship and just watch them grow. And I think we can say with when you have multiple kids, you realize that every kid's got a different temperament, and so you're like, wait, what worked with one child may not work with another. But it's a parenting journey. And I also think try to remember you're not alone, right? Like, look for people to support you. And I mean, there's lots of stuff out there, right? Friends, family. I know there's parenting groups online, locally. And then if you're struggling too, right, there is professional advice out there. You can talk to your pediatrician, you can talk to a psychologist, you can talk to, educators, et cetera. So I don't know if you'll have anything to add to that.
Well, you just reminded
Right.
me of something that I actually do think about. I ask myself this question a lot when it comes to these kind of bigger things, especially comparison trap, when my kid is like, "Oh, but so and so has something," or I'm trying to figure out, "Oh, but you're kind of immature, so you're not ready for that type of thing." And the question that I always ask myself is, all right, so when this kid is an adult and they are sitting with their therapist talking about their biggest trauma, am I going to be proud of that or not? And so if your biggest trauma is that you didn't get a phone whenever your friends did, oh my God, where's my gold star? I am okay with that.
Right.
I'm going to
Yep.
sleep real good. And so that's kind of my litmus test now, and that makes me feel like a good enough parent.
Okay. That's good perspective. Thank you.
Oh, that's
This
good.
has
No,
been,
this has really been fun. I think this has been
yeah.
good. I think we'll continue to have these type of conversations between the three of us, and we'll certainly have our experts come on and talk to us about different topics. But this has been super great. And Eve, welcome, welcome, welcome. Andy, we can't tell you how much we appreciate all the things you gave to us and our audience, and we wish you the best of luck in Albuquerque. So for
And
now, we'll sign off and
well, hold on,
see
big
you
plugs.
guys
Don't
next
forget to
week.
give the Mending Minds. Remind everybody when are we doing that?
October
October 4th,
4th.
Okay,
Come see
Smith
us.
Park
Smith Park.
in University Park, right? It's gonna be a great. Matthew promises fantastic weather, and we're actually, is this year 4 or year 5?
This is your
5, I
five.
think.
Year
Yeah.
5, that is crazy. But we're getting more professional as the years go by. So we've got like an official, what do we call Jimmy? It's like the race
Timekeeper, race
timekeeper. You get a
coordinator,
bib.
timekeeper, you get
Yeah,
bibs.
so if you're a true professional runner, you can come and know that you're entering a 5K and it's all good. And then if you're Eve and you're running away from running, you're also more than welcome. So it's going to be
Find me at the
fantastic.
bracelet station.
The bracelet station,
I'm
that's
the arts and
awesome.
crafts. No, I
All
think he
right.
is a certified time person. So, to my understanding, you can get a certified time that helps with other race entries. I hear that is important. I don't understand that world, but I love that journey for them.
Yes, and we'll all find out more on October 4th. All right. Thank you
Thanks,
all, and we
guys.
look forward to next time.